I've mentioned that this entire book really is a cautionary tale against George R. R. Martin's gardener style. He calls himself a gardener. I've talked about this before. That George R. R. Martin talks about the two writing styles, the architect and the gardener, and he considers himself a gardener. That he sort of just plants seeds and sees where it's going to go. He has an idea like, okay, this is what I would like the garden to look like, but if something pops up here and there, well then let's go and do that. Uh, so at this time in the story, it was time to start trimming and pruning, and I started running into these problems a lot sooner than George did, admittedly. But around this time, the story's getting out of control, growing too big, too many things are going on. Things were gonna need to be brought in because this is like 50,000 words into the story, so the swell had happened. Now we need to start tapering to the point of the story. I watched a video where a guy was complaining that in the Game of Thrones TV show, character deaths were used to end stories instead of start them like in the books or like in the first few seasons of Game of Thrones. Spoilers for the books and the show, but Ned Stark's death is the motivation point for everything that happens afterward. So it's a motivation for this war, this drama that goes on. Uh, where in the show, to contrast, they just kill off Barristan Selmy and it's never spoken of or something. But the thing is, that idea of every character death starting three more stories, that's not a sustainable pattern. That's not a sustainable thing to do. For every character that dies, you start three stories. That's you can't do that. You can't start three storylines for every character that dies, which is what George did. And now the books are so big and there's so many characters and there's so much going on that these books are never going to get finished. And this is really the problem with George's gardening style of writing. He never did any of the pruning. He didn't pull any weeds. He didn't pull the right weeds, at least. Uh, to tell you the truth, like I struggled through Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons because everything that the first three books made me care about was gone. Tywin was gone. Robb was gone. The plot was wrapped up. Everything that was set up in the first book that Ned was trying to uncover, he's like trying to figure out this mystery. All that's basically wrapped up by the end of the third book. So really, all that's left that I'm interested in is what's going on with Jon Snow. And by the end of Dance with Dragons, you know what happens there. And honestly, it was just torture reading those Daenerys chapters in Dance with Dragons. If I cared about Daenerys at all, I don't now. If I ever did, I don't. I definitely don't now. So the whole plot, everything that we were introduced to care about, like in the first book, about with Ned, what's going on with Jon Arryn, Joffrey's parents, all this stuff that Ned cared about, that got us hooked into the story, all that's dealt with. All that's gone. So I got to the point like, why am I reading this? How is what's going on in Braavos? What does that have to do with what's going on in the Dothraki Sea, and how does that connect to what John Connington is doing, and what does that have to do with Sam going to the Citadel and Melisandre and Cersei and King's Landing? What is that? And what happened to Brienne? What's going on with that and Jaime? And how does all this? What's the plot here? What's actually happening? I can't see anything that's going on. So all this stuff, I'm seeing all these branches, and I'm like, where does this go? How is this going to be brought together? Now and then we're in the fourth book, we're getting introduced to Cthulhu Blackbeard, Euron Greyjoy, and young Griff. All this stuff seems to come out of nowhere. And honestly, that's what happened with this book that I wrote. It happened a lot sooner. This veers course. So everything that we're introduced to in the first half of the book spirals into absurdity, which is why, honestly, why I never finished this book.